I solemnly swear that I am up to no good.
Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot and Prongs are proud to present the Marauder's Map.
If you succeed tonight, more than one innocent life may be spared.
Expecto Patronum!
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We're doing Chapter 19, The Servant of Lord Voldemort. We have Molly back with us.
Hello, everyone.
It's been a while since you've been on.
I know.
This is the Night Bus chapter, somewhere around there. So
yeah, it's been a hot minute.
It's been a long time. So I'm sure you have a lot of takes and stuff like that over all of the discussions. But
definitely do.
This chapter is pretty interesting. We just came off of very Marauders-heavy chapters, kind of giving the history of Lupin and James and Sirius and Peter. Big chapters, even though one of them was only like a handful of pages long. But this chapter, we ended the last chapter on a big Snape walks in and reveals himself as only Snape can in this overly dramatic...
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. And this chapter basically starts off with Snape announcing his presence and confronting Lupin and Sirius and having a back and forth with Hermione and Harry, which escalates to an aggressive level. and then we get more from Sirius. Sirius really steps up and takes a more vocal role, other than, more than just one will die tonight and, all of that gloom and doom that he was portraying in the earlier chapters. So we get a little bit more of Sirius. Lupin and Sirius try to piece together that night of Lily and James's death. Lupin tries to piece it together. Sirius adds in some details. And then we really get the full story with Peter a little bit. Peter is revealed, and he tries to get his way out of being punished by Sirius and Lupin. Mm-hmm. And then Lupin and Ron at the end kind of have a little bonding moment after where they were in one of the last chapters. So there is a lot going on in this, but Snape gets a good chunk of it. And, right off the bat, I just got to say this is one of the reasons Julie and I say don't leave things behind.
Yep.
And I get Harry was in a state and there was a lot going on, but he left the cloak behind, and that's how Snape slid his way into the Shrieking Shack unnoticed.
Yep.
But Snape's an interesting character in this chapter, I feel like.
Oh, for sure.
He's a little deranged. He's not in his most logical, calm mind.
No.
And I think you get a sense of just how dangerous Snape can be. Mm-hmm. He goes for Lupin immediately and disables Lupin.
Yeah.
And then he has this line after Sirius comes after him. He points his wand directly at Sirius's head and says, quote, "Give me a reason. Give me a reason to do it, and I swear I will."
Yep.
And Sirius stops cold in his tracks.
Yeah.
And doesn't make another step forward. A menacing, chilling line from Snape after he just disabled Lupin fairly easily.
Yeah.
What do you think about that line with Snape? What do you think about his early interactions with Lupin and Sirius here?
I think obviously things are very heated at this point. There's a lot of miscommunications and new findings that we're figuring out. I also underlined that too, because clearly these interactions, you're like, all right, yeah, these people, this group of people, they do not get along. They do not intermingle well.
There's a little animosity here.
Yeah.
Going all the way back to their childhood.
Yeah.
And we see McGonagall doing magic, and we see some of the other professors, Flitwick, doing magic. But you don't really see Snape doing magic like that. No. He's in the potions room and he's, brewing stuff.
Right.
Here, I think Harry and Hermione and Ron are just like, oh,
Yeah.
he is a threatening presence when provoked.
And he's a talented wizard. Like,
Yes.
he's not just some schmo with potions. Like, he's always wanted that defense against the dark arts,
Right, exactly.
position. Like, he's a talented wizard, so...
He's formidable in many different ways.
Yeah.
He has some... obviously, he always gets annoyed by Hermione and Harry pretty regularly. But here, he has a very short temper. He's already kind of off the reservation a little bit. And he has some really sharp comebacks. The first one he goes, when Hermione tries to slow the process down and be like, let's take a step here. And he comes back at her with hold your tongue, which is clearly just a better way of saying, shut up.
The British
Shut
way
it.
of
Yeah, right.
saying shut up.
Yep. And then JK just hits the caps lock button
Yes.
and goes all caps.
Oh, yeah.
And the worst insult I think Snape could have given Hermione was keep quiet, you stupid girl.
Yeah.
Which, that's probably the worst thing you could probably say to Hermione. And then, goes, don't talk about what you don't understand, which they understand, I think, more than Snape realizes at this point. Because I don't think he heard all of what Lupin has been saying and what Lupin has told Harry in the past, but there's obviously some stuff going on with Snape right now.
Yeah. Lots of emotions.
I did take note, though, because Harry also speaks up, not only Hermione. And it took Snape. We've talked many times on this podcast about Harry flying off the handle, not exactly thinking the most logically.
Yes.
Here, stunningly, in the presence of Snape, he comes and says something very calmly. Like, Professor Lupin could have killed me 100 times this year. I've been alone with him loads of times. Defensive lessons against the Dementors. If he was helping Black, why didn't he just finish me off during one of those?
Right.
Calm, logical, well-presented argument. Snape doesn't even really come back all that harshly. It's just, don't ask me to fathom the way a werewolf's mind works. Get out of the way, Potter. Like, not all caps, just like a whatever, just a dismissive thing.
Right.
Then Harry flips to 100, from 0 to 100 real quick.
Right.
And JK hits the all caps button again and goes, "You're pathetic," Harry yelled. "Just because they made a fool of you at school, you won't even listen."
Yeah.
Aggressive. It's very
It goes from 0 to 100. Lots of emotions happening.
Wow.
Yeah.
I almost got whiplash from that change in tone.
Right.
It's insane. To which Snape shockingly replied, "Silence, I will not be spoken to like that," which I feel like is any adult's response to
for sure.
A child throwing a temper tantrum.
Yeah.
Temper tantrum sounds like I'm dismissing this whole...
Yeah.
Obviously, Harry's invested in this to a deeper level.
Right.
But when you just go from calm voice to all of a sudden you're screaming at me, it's like, child.
Right. Right.
Tone it down a bit. Yeah, so I don't know. I just noticed that Harry for once is actually calm and it only lasted 3 sentences.
Right. Yes. Calm. Ah!
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I don't know that Harry really... He's so biased against Snape for good reason.
Right.
I don't think he's able to see a lot of where Snape's coming from in this. Nor should he. He's a 13-year-old kid.
Plus, he only knows what he knows, and also too. I mean, if it's an argument, it's a.
They made a fool of you at school. They almost got you killed that one time, but get over that.
Put on the fact that he's 13 years old,
Yeah.
and it's an argument. Most of the time, people will say things that they aren't clear-headed with thinking. So not that I'm defend. I don't know. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, Snape is obviously in an aggressive state of mind here.
Yeah.
And he's lost a little bit of his usual calm and controlled demeanor.
Right.
And I guess Harry's just mimicking that almost to a
Right.
level and going back at it with the same level of...
Right.
But anyway,
Last, like, three chapters, it's all very much like a roller coaster that you're just on.
very much so, yeah.
You know?
Very much. And people that have watched the movie, because I know Anna hates the movie. I know most Harry Potter book fans hate the movie because they cut out a lot of Lupin, specifically, his dialogue. They do some of this word for word.
Yeah.
But more the dramatic, like, one-liners they do word for word. Like Ron and Sirius have the good one-liners. But they cut a lot of Lupin's monologues out of this. The for lack of a better term, like the exposition dumps.
Yes.
And obviously that's a lot of the Marauder information, and it's a lot of background that you get, which a lot of people just love the Marauders and want that information included. And
exactly.
for people that don't even watch the movies, you don't know that background then.
Right.
Which is a shame. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Snape ends up getting hit by the spell that he taught them. Mm-hmm. If we remember that from the Dueling Club way back in Chamber of Secrets, Harry hits him with Expelliarmus, but not only him, Ron and Hermione also hit Snape with the Expelliarmus spell, sending him crashing into a wall.
Yeah.
And being unconscious, which opens up the floor now for Lupin and Sirius to have the floor, if you will. And essentially they're like, this is stupid. Mm-hmm. Let's just prove this to you once and for all.
Yeah.
Like, give me the rat, and we'll prove to you that it's Peter. And if it's not Peter, then the rat's going to be fine.
Right.
And we'll just go about our business and bring Sirius back to the castle.
Right.
So they do. They describe this, J.K. describes this somewhat grotesque transformation of Peter back into a human.
Oh, it's so gross. Like, when I was rereading it, I was like, ooh, like, she really did a good job of, like, displaying and describing, like, his personality and, like, human form.
Yeah, we had kind of discussed in the last episode where Anna's talking about Animagus and how so much of you and who you are as a person goes into what Animagus you are.
Yeah.
And then I questioned her on, well, if one works like that, why couldn't the thing that you become also have such of an impact on you? So, for example, he becomes a rat.
Yeah.
And then is a rat for 12 years.
Right.
That's gotta, like, change you in a way.
Oh,
to be
yeah.
in your Animagus form for such an insanely long period of time.
Oh, yeah.
That has to also change a little bit of who you are, and the squeaky voice that J.K. describes, I imagine. I'm not saying he had, like, a deep, full voice.
Yeah.
But maybe squeakier after being a mouse for 12 years.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, it leaves, and obviously he's been stressed, and the rat's lost hair and become thinner, which they describe. There was a cool description of, like, a plump man that's clearly lost a lot of weight in a short amount of time.
Right.
Look, I'm like, that's an interesting description.
I wonder, though, in those 12 years, like, if he ever was just like, man, I just gotta change back into human form. And, like, went off somewhere and was like, oh, okay, yeah, cracked his back and then went back into
If I were him, I would have.
Right?
I mean...
Sorry, totally random thought.
Yeah, to just go out back of the Weasley house and chill with the gnomes and, like, stretch your legs, kick a couple of gnomes. It's all good. You'd think he would have found that time. It sounds like he didn't, though. I mean, the way they portray it is...
He's a rat for
12 years straight.
So, I don't know. Yeah, for sure. You're going to probably take on some of those rat characteristics.
Yeah. The one that stuck out to me was just the squeaky voice. I'm like, maybe.
Yeah.
So Lupin and Sirius start to piece together how the night went of Lily and James's death. And Pettigrew is trying to twist the story, and honestly, I think he does a really good job. Pressed against his back against the wall here.
Yeah.
I think he does a good job of trying to figure out ways to explain his way out of it.
Yeah.
Even though he's running against roadblocks, like, every time he says something. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like, he gets disproved by Lupin or Sirius or Harry or Hermione or whoever almost constantly throughout this whole thing. But
Yeah.
he tries to keep spinning something and make it seem reasonable. And he touched on a couple of things that we've talked about before in the podcast of, like, guys, you don't understand back then. Like, when Voldemort knocks on your door, you know, that's a whole vibe that, you know, Sirius comes back at him with, like, well, you had to die.
Right.
Like, if he knocks on your door, okay,
Right.
die and go down a hero
Right.
that people end up talking about, like, in future years, instead of taking the quote-unquote easier way out.
Yeah.
And I feel like that interaction, it's a great interaction. And it shows Sirius in a brave, full Gryffindor light.
Loyal. Yeah.
Yeah. It shows Sirius in probably the light that everybody wants someone to react in.
Right.
And it makes Peter look terrible.
Horrible.
All I would say to that is, you never know what your response is going to be when that moment arrives.
Yes.
You hope, everyone hopes they react like Sirius would.
Right.
Fear can manipulate your reaction to a level that you never knew possible.
Right.
And fear was already there. It didn't even take Voldemort to knock on your door, like we've talked about. The fear was spreading throughout the country for weeks and months and years at this point. And then he actually shows up.
Yeah.
Like, all I'm saying is you would like to think, I think everybody would like to think they would react like Sirius.
Absolutely.
It's just, you don't know until you know.
Exactly. Well, but yeah, I mean, plus too, like, if your life is at stake, I think our human instinct is survive.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, like, again, I would hope I would act like Sirius
Same.
and protect my friends and my family
Same.
and everything, but I don't know. Plus too, I mean, you guys have talked about it in previous podcasts, like, we don't know too, like, the full dynamic of how Peter was with, you know, the other Marauders. You know, especially if those three and like Sirius and James being standouts, like, there could have been a jealousy aspect of that in there.
Sure.
I know you guys have touched on that before. You know, I kind of equate it to almost sometimes what the stuff that happens between Harry and Ron and the jealousy factor with that. You know, like, who knows? Like, maybe if Peter Pettigrew stood in front of the mirror, you know, would he see, you know, himself holding the Quidditch cup and being head boy and, you know, all of that entangled. So, you know, I think he's more of an in-depth villain than we tend to give him credit for.
I love our discussions on Pettigrew because I think he is a more nuanced character than a lot give him credit for.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean to say we're giving him a pass.
No,
his
no,
prior transgressions.
Absolutely not. He's still a rat.
Yeah, he still did awful things, betrayed his friends.
Yeah.
Terrible things. No one's letting him off the hook for that. But that interaction between him and Sirius right there, I thought it was a great interaction. And I believe Sirius would have followed through on that.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're in the wizarding world at that time, and you just go to an average wizard's house, not a member of the Order of the Phoenix, and you ask them, are you gonna die for your friend, or are you going to give them up? I don't know that a majority of them would die.
Right.
I think some would.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just... And it's not because you're innately a horrible person.
Right.
You're just, like you said, trying to survive. You're trying to get to the next day, which is your base human instinct.
Right.
Not even human instinct. It's the
Right.
base instinct of all living things.
Well, I mean, I'm taking this a dark, weird turn.
Go
Sorry.
for it.
But I mean, like, even in the military, you know, like, people get tortured over trying to give information.
Sure.
And, like, there's an aspect of that where, like, you train for that, you know? Most people are not trained to deal with these kinds of situations.
No, it's a great point. It's like, that's a difference between the Order and maybe, like,
Right.
the average household.
Exactly.
In England at the time. Yes, Lupin and Sirius might be more apt to defy Voldemort.
Yeah.
That's literally their job right now.
Right.
Others might not be.
Right.
And it's not because they want to be a Death Eater, it's because they just want to get to the next day.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's an interesting interaction between the two of them, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I got to mention Crookshanks. Everybody's going to be mad at me if I don't mention the Crookshanks aspect of it. Sirius goes into that Crookshanks is an extremely smart cat and could see through the disguise of Peter
Yes.
and himself
Yeah.
and realize that neither of us were what we presented ourselves as being. And by the way, this is all a shock to Hermione. Like, Hermione's learning a lot right now. And I'm sure Ron is like, I told her. But Sirius says that he, quote, found a way to communicate with Crookshanks, which I feel like is an interesting phrasing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Anna said that maybe the fact that he was more holy dog than we think, being an animagus, maybe that was his way of communicating. But then it gets into the, like, well, can a dog actually communicate with a cat?
Yeah.
Like, how does animal communication really work between species?
Okay, so looking in human world, right? Like, in the world we live in, like, body language is a big part of how animals communicate.
Sure.
Like, I mean, with, like, my dog.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
they're big on body language. Like, they can tell when you're upset. They can tell when you're angry. They can tell when you're happy. For some odd reason, Odin always knows, even when I'm just changing my shoes, whether or not we're going for a walk, you know? So I'm sure there's some aspect of that, but also, too, they're in a magical world, right? So there's more possibilities of maybe abilities to communicate.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder how he got across, like, rat,
Right.
bad, want it.
Yeah.
Can
That
you,
thing.
Can you get me that?
I need it.
Right.
Bad dude.
Or, like, the Neville passwords. Like, how does he get across, like, I want to get in there.
Right.
Get me specifically
Right.
passwords.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
maybe, like, Crookshanks was just like, okay, he wants to
Right.
get into the school to get this rat.
Right.
I'll need to get him these.
Right.
But yeah, that was some news dropped that
Right.
Crookshanks was the one that stole Neville's passwords from his bedside.
Right.
Poor Neville.
But okay, so again, this just makes me wish too sometimes that we could read animals' minds and know what they're thinking, and totally random, I know.
Yeah. We get the news that Sirius still blames himself for Lily and James's death
That was heartbreaking.
because he, and the word he uses here is specific, he, quote, persuaded them
Yeah.
to switch secret keepers. So we've talked a little bit about how, you know, Lily and James always obviously have the final say in it. So it's not like they were completely, they approved it.
Yeah.
But Sirius obviously took a leading role in eventually what would cause their death. So he blamed himself quite a lot for that. Just him outsmarting himself.
Yeah.
I think it was like a bluff, and Voldemort called him on it.
Yeah.
And it just, you know, if Sirius could do it all over again, he would just remain that way and then just take the death. But then you're playing a what if now. Like, what if Sirius kept it? And Voldemort shows up at his doorstep, and let's say Sirius dies. How does the rest of it play out from there?
Right.
It Pettigrew was already a spy at that point,
Yeah.
so it's an interesting kind of back and forth. But
Yeah.
anyway, we find out that Sirius has some insider information on Peter. His time spent in Azkaban meant he heard a bunch of actual Death Eaters talking, and they all wanted Peter, and they all wanted to kill Peter because they feel like the double crosser double crossed.
Yeah.
And yes, James and Lily died, but they feel as though Peter used them as a sacrifice to bring down the Dark Lord. So, Peter's really on an island here. There's not one person that wants him healthy and happy.
Yeah.
There's no, and maybe that's why I guess they suggest that he's been a rat for 12 years, is because there's still Death Eaters out there that would be on the lookout for him. So.
You know what, though? That is kind of an interesting take, though. Like, he outs where Lily and James are, but in the end, it sends Voldemort into hiding for 12 years, and there is some peace. Like, that is an interesting take. That never really crossed my mind.
What if...
Like, his intentions were... I mean, obviously they didn't know that there would be a deeper love magic in that, with protecting...
Yeah, you can't predict that, yeah.
Right. But it is kind of interesting that that did end up happening, and that was the conclusion that some of them were drawn to.
With Peter's ability to spin a story like he's trying to do in this chapter...
Yeah.
If you were Peter...
Right.
Would you try to spin the story back that day?
Right.
Of like, yeah, I was the secret keeper, and yeah, I did this, but look at where we are now.
Yeah.
It's one sacrifice,
right.
or two sacrifices, but it's a much happier world that we're now living in.
Right.
Do you sacrifice two people to end essentially like
right.
a war?
Right.
When multiple people have already died anyway.
Right. Like using that information to your advantage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you try to spin it if you're Peter at that point?
Right.
But then you still have Death Eaters that would...
Kill you, yeah.
Try to kill you.
Right. Either way,
you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And then you have Sirius and Lupin that would be like, you still gave up our best friends.
Right.
Like, Peter was in a lose-lose situation no matter what.
100%.
But it'd be interesting to see if he tried to spin that story.
Right.
And try to squirm out of it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe he gets a little bit more slack.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah. Still a rat.
Still a rat. I did find it interesting in all of this discussion that they're having, because we found it interesting in the past. The people who use the name Voldemort are few and far between.
Yeah.
And Lupin, Sirius, both use it liberally. They have zero qualms about saying the name. Mm-hmm. And, which I guess just gives you an insight to their courage about it. Mm-hmm. Peter starts off with "He Who Must Not Be Named," which I feel like is also an interesting tell, because he doesn't say the Dark Lord.
Right.
He says "He Who Must Not Be Named," which I feel like is an interesting tell right there.
Yes.
And then the second bit, he finally relents, and the second time he says it, he does say Voldemort. Mm-hmm. So he's also willing to use it, which I find interesting, because there aren't many that have gotten that close to Voldemort that are comfortable saying the name Voldemort.
Right.
So that's kind of an interesting...
Oh, for sure. It's him trying to be manipulative. You know, he's probably like, oh, wait, they don't say "He Who Must Not Be Named" or the Dark Lord. Like, they say Voldemort. Like, he's quick on his toes to be like...
Could be another survival tactic that he's using.
Yeah.
Could be. That'd be an interesting... I mean, I shouldn't be surprised if he is trying to switch tactics.
Right.
Like, mid-conversation, be like, oh, this is how this is trending. Let me go that way.
Very opportunistic.
Yes. Peter, I'm finding, has characteristics of Gryffindors, obviously, because he was one, mm-hmm. Ravenclaw and Slytherin.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he has a little bit of all three, which all three of the houses do tend to bleed into each other a little bit. But there's definitely some aspects of Ravenclaw and Slytherin in him to be, like, picking up on where this is going and trying to...
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Zero Hufflepuff in him.
Yes, I think that would be a fair assessment to make. Anyway, I love how Hermione, bless her, tries to get in on this conversation.
I know.
The guts that you'd even have to open your mouth while all three of these wizards are trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And she's just like, Professor Lupin, can I say something? Lupin is just like, yes, you can. Like, in that tone, like, I just picture him being like, yes, Hermione, go ahead.
I heard, like, hands raised in class.
You may speak, yes. It's just, like, wow. It's just an interesting, like, it almost feels like that's a disconnected conversation from everything else going around it.
I just love how it just kind of follows, like, a real argument between people, though, you know, like arguments ebb and flow, and this, I feel like, obviously ebbs and flows, and you know, you have moments where it's like, okay, we're calm. No, we're not.
I do like where she goes with it, though, because she mentions, like, you know, Scabbers has been a rat for 12 years. How does Sirius know that A, it exists, and B, which rat out of the millions of rats there are, which one? And Lupin actually takes a step back and he's like, actually, that's a good question. That's a fair point. Sirius, you wanna explain that one?
Right.
I just see a lot of my own mannerisms in Lupin. Like, I feel like, actually, that's a fair question.
Fair point.
Can we figure that one out?
Yeah.
And then Sirius kind of goes into this monologue of seeing the paper that Fudge, which was mentioned, by the way, way back when Fudge was speaking about giving him, like, the crossword puzzle or something like that. Little tidbit way in the past that we're now bringing back up again. But he sees the paper, he sees a picture of the Weasley family, notices the rat is missing a toe on one of the paws, immediately puts it into context because, of course, Peter would want to be near a wizarding family to keep his ear to the ground on anything Death Eater or Voldy related, especially when one of those members of the family works at the Ministry of Magic. So, again, Peter being, you know, resourceful, I guess, in a sense. And then it lights a fire in Sirius that he hadn't had.
Yeah.
But he talks about that fire being lit, which the Dementors couldn't take from him because it's not necessarily a happy thought. It's him. He called it an obsession.
Yeah.
Which is where he gets the he's at Hogwarts mantra.
Right.
And then he says he escaped Azkaban because he never truly lost his mind. And he says it was specifically because he knew he was innocent.
Yeah. Which
also was not a happy thought. So they couldn't take that from him either. So the Dementors really had nothing to actually take from Sirius.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was able to withstand or endure. And when it got too much for him, he would always switch back into his animagus form because Dementors can't pick up on animals as well or as easily. Which is how he then escaped when they brought him food. He slipped out as the dog slipped between the bars, which stuns me.
Yeah.
Because if you're as big of a dog as we think you are, how are you slipping between
the
bars? I get he's, like, malnourished and smaller, but still. And then the other part that got me was he swam back to land as a dog.
That's impressive.
That's a long doggy paddle.
That is a long doggy paddle.
And nothing like... I'm sorry, the only image I have of Azkaban is literally the few shots that they give us in the movies. It looks like Alcatraz times 1,000.
Yes, a long swim.
A long, very dangerous swim. And part of and this was obviously modeled, I think, after Alcatraz a little bit. And Alcatraz is known as an inescapable prison because of currents in the bay and in the ocean, and sharks in the bay and in the ocean, and he's just chilling along.
I'm thinking about him being malnourished and, like, doing all that work.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow.
He didn't even grab the meal on the way out.
Yeah.
He just left.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I know.
So, but he dumps a lot of knowledge on how to escape Azkaban right there.
Yeah.
Not an easy feat, but he managed it.
I hope you know, too, all I'm thinking about is Odin swimming.
I figured, yeah. And I mean, like, Odin being the black lab that he is.
And the water dog.
Yeah. Next time you go to, like, a forest preserve,
right,
and he jumps in the water, you could, like, time him.
Right.
And we could just run an experiment, and it'd be great.
Yes. We'll figure it out.
How fast does Odin swim? And then we'll just extrapolate it.
Right. And we'll just be like, yeah, that's how fast Sirius swam.
Clearly. Yep.
Yep.
Wrapping up the chapter here, Lupin, I still think forgives Sirius real quick on the whole fact that everybody thought Lupin himself was the spy.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a quick apology, but I guess they trade apologies here because it's like, hey, sorry, we thought you were the spy. It's okay. Sorry, I thought you were a murderer. Okay, like, let's go on about our ways.
It all goes down really fast.
It does. It's a very, like, Lupin, bless him, he takes in a lot and is expected to deal with a lot in very short, brief moments. He's not allowed time to process.
Yeah.
So it's a miracle that he's as cool with this as he is.
Yeah.
Ron, I think, says the quote that we are all thinking throughout. The ones who have read this book and read the series, he finally utters the quote that I think every one of us rereading this series has thought. I let him sleep in my bed.
Yeah.
Like, Ron was sleeping with Peter Pettigrew for, like, years. Like, and every time we would see a phrase of like, Scabbers is in Ron's lap or something like that, we would read it as Peter Pettigrew is sitting in Ron's lap right now. It was very creepy. And Ron finally utters that, whoa, dude, this was really creepy. Like, yeah, it's disturbing on a lot of different levels. And now all of you who are reading this for the first time are now fully aware of that creepiness. Not a spoiler anymore. It is what it is.
Yes.
Anyway. Yeah, just wrap your head around that for a second.
Yes.
And then you and I are both in healthcare professions. After all of this kind of simmers down, Ron allows Lupin to kind of come over and address the leg, which he tried to do earlier, but Ron threw him to the side of, like, you're a werewolf, get away from me.
Right.
Which I think we wanted to talk about a little bit more. But this time, things are a little bit more clear. Ron is still upset more at Pettigrew of anything else. So Lupin comes over and uses the spell Furula.
Yeah.
Furula. I don't know. I can't say it. I would be bad at this. But he uses that spell to bandage Ron's legs. Bandages come out and attaches it to a splint.
Yeah.
I know I'm more in a field setting. I would love that.
Yeah.
That would make my life so much easier.
I know, I underlined that because I saw that. I'm like, oh man, I bet you Dan was so jealous of this spell.
So jealous.
So jealous.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, let's pause here for a second and we'll get into some spoilers. I think you had some thoughts on the werewolf thing. So we'll get into those in the spoilers.
Yeah.
All right. We'll be right back.
You foul, loathsome, evil little con...
If you're looking for plump lips that last, you need to know about Juvederm lip fillers. With Juvederm Volbella XC and Juvederm Ultra XC, your lip look, whether it's subtle or bold, can last up to 1 full year with optimal treatment and no additional maintenance. Find a licensed specialist and see if it's right for you at Juvederm.com today. That's JUVEDERM.com. Add fullness to lips in adults over 21 with Juvederm Volbella XC or Juvederm Ultra XC. Do not use if you have severe allergies or a history of severe allergic reactions, or if you are allergic to lidocaine or the proteins used in Juvederm. Tell your doctor if you have a history of scarring or taking medicines that decrease the body's immune response or that can prolong bleeding. Common side effects include injection site redness, swelling, pain, tenderness, firmness, lumps, bumps, bruising, discoloration, or itching. As with all gel fillers, there's a rare risk of unintentional injection into a blood vessel, which can cause vision abnormalities, blindness, stroke, temporary scabs, or scarring. For full important safety information, visit www.juvederm.com.
All right, so we are back with the spoiler section of Chapter 19, The Servant of Lord Voldemort, and I think Molly had some werewolf takes.
I do. This episodes, you guys have discussed werewolves. y'all know that I am a big Molly Weasley family in general fan. And I can see where, there can be some prejudice towards werewolves, considering what they can do, how dangerous they can be in terms of how they go about things. You take a look at the dangerous ones that come from Lord Voldemort's team. Bites little children, turns little children into werewolves. As a mom, I would probably be like, stay away from werewolves.
You're telling me Greyback is not a wonderful, kind werewolf human being combo? That's a hot take, Molly. I don't know that we can condone such.
Yeah. So as a mother, and especially with how Molly Weasley is with her children and being so protective of her kids, I think most of what comes through to me with Molly Weasley is just how protective she is over her kids. She's a mama bear. So, she wants the best for her kids. And she wants, I'm sure, for her kids to be accepted within society. And, again, is every werewolf a bad werewolf? No. But there are a lot of them out there. I can fully understand Ron at first finding out that Lupin is a werewolf, being like, get away from me. Like, I don't know if you're gonna, bite me or whatever.
There's definitely a stereotype and a stigma that goes along with werewolf.
Yes.
Yeah. I have done some research myself on werewolves and Remus Lupin, because, this is the book to do both.
Right.
Right. So werewolves are known to particularly go after humans, not animals, which, again, would track with the Animagus thing and their plan to be Animagus. And specifically, muggles usually die from werewolf bites.
Yeah.
Wizards and witches can die, but are more apt to surviving a bite. Hence the propagation of more and more werewolves. That's how they, quote-unquote, breed, for the most part. Although, fun fact. You know what fun fact I did find about werewolves?
What?
So, if two werewolves were to meet and mate during a full moon,
Yeah.
supposedly, and this is from the Wizarding World, I'm not making this up.
Okay.
This is from a Harry Potter source.
Okay.
They would produce cubs, like wolf cubs.
Oh, wow.
Not human at all in any way, shape, or form. Just straight up wolf cubs.
Oh.
And not werewolves.
Yeah.
Like wolf.
Yeah.
And the only discernible difference between those wolf cubs and actual wolves is just the wolf cubs would have a higher level of intelligence.
Oh.
Like a near human intelligence level.
Yeah.
Which is a scary thought anyway, like wolves with like a
Right.
human intelligence.
Right.
That's the only discernible difference. And it's rumored that Dumbledore actually let cubs of that ilk, being born to two werewolves meeting and mating on a full moon,
Yeah.
into the Forbidden Forest. And there's a set of those cubs in the Forbidden Forest,
That's awesome.
which has led credence to the werewolves, quote unquote, even though that's not technically true in the Forbidden Forest.
Huh. That's really fascinating information.
Yep, it's an exceedingly rare thing,
Yes.
but according to the Wizarding World, it has happened.
Yes.
And it's a thing.
Can I have a pet wolf cub?
We can work on finding two werewolves and getting that done. You can adopt a werewolf cub.
Doesn't sound dangerous at all.
I would hope that the werewolf would give birth as a werewolf, because that would be some
Right.
messed up stuff.
Yeah. And I guess I wouldn't really want them, I don't know, as pets. This is the Newt Scamander in me. I'm like,
Yeah.
I want to meet these
Now-
wolf cubs.
That was a random offshoot tangent. But fun fact for you
Yeah.
guys. But as far as Lupin goes, and to your point about the stigma or the stereotype behind werewolves, so Lupin's father who I believe his name is Lyle, Lyall, Lupin,
Okay.
was actually a gifted wizard in his own right, who actually was an expert on magical creatures. I'm blanking on what the term for the magical creature was, but let's think about like poltergeist, boggarts,
Yeah.
and there was one other one that he threw in there, and I can't remember off the top of my head. But those types of entities, which also would indicate then boggart is more of a spirit
Yeah.
than a creature,
Okay.
which might be the reason why it taps into fears so well in the
Yeah.
psyche. But anyway, he was particularly known for dealing with Welsh boggarts, and he was an expert at it. He
Yeah.
was known for it. And when Voldemort was on the rise, he was asked to be part of the Ministry of Magic. He was offered a job in the Department of Regulation of Magical Creatures, whatever. And because obviously Voldemort was recruiting creatures of dark natures, including boggarts and dementors and other things like that. So he was asked to take part in it. Well, as a part of that section of the ministry, he came across Fenrir Greyback, who was arrested for the potential murder of 2 Muggle children.
Yeah.
He, Greyback, supposedly argued that he was stunned to be in the wizarding world. He was stunned that this even existed, and wizards and witches are a thing, and oh my gosh, this is sensational. What are you talking about? Well, his shabby appearance and the fact that he didn't actually possess a wand made the ministry believe him that he wasn't a wizard.
Really?
So they were about to let him go. And Lyle was in the room, and his expertise on magical creatures and that of dark nature, he was in the room and he was like, what are you talking about? There's a full moon, like not 24 hours from now. Let's just hold him and see if he transforms.
Yeah.
Done and done. And they're like, nah, I think we're good. And Lyle was like, are you kidding me? If he's a werewolf, they're deranged, they're sadistic, they're murderous, they're blah, blah, blah. And he went off on this trail
Yeah.
of negative characteristics of werewolves.
Yeah.
Greyback's listening to all of this in the room. And the ministry overrules Lyle, lets Greyback go. Greyback goes back to his coven of werewolves and is like, this guy in the ministry was saying all this stuff about us.
Yeah.
And how we're not human, and how we're soulless evil beings. Let's show him how soulless and evil we can be then.
Yeah.
If he's going to depict us like that, let's make him right.
Yeah.
What happened? Greyback breaks into Remus's room right before his 5th birthday, bites him, wanted to kill him. Lyle broke in, blasted Greyback out of the room. Too late.
Yeah.
And that's how Lupin became a werewolf. That's the back history of why specifically Greyback targeted Remus as a child.
I didn't. Yeah, that's awesome.
So, but to hit that stigma and that stereotype, because the reality of it is, obviously, except for a couple of days in and around the full moon, they're just normal, average people. Yes, they could be murderous, but if they're murderous, they're probably murderous before they turn into a werewolf anyway.
Right.
Like Greyback, for example.
Right.
But if they're not, like Lupin, like Remus, yeah, they turn murderous in
Right.
in that full moon time. But generally, they're just nice, regular people.
Right.
Which Greyback knew, and he's like, wow, this guy's portraying us as this, that, or whatever. He's perpetuating the stereotype
Yeah.
of all werewolves. We'll show him what we can do then.
Yeah.
So that's an example. And then Lyle, went on and remembered that interaction with Greyback, and he's like, I did this.
Yeah.
Because I called him all of those things in that room, and then he targeted my son.
Right.
That's my bad.
So gut wrenching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting story about the whole stereotype background of it. So even Lyle, who knows what werewolves are, still had that stigma and that stereotype.
Right.
If an educated individual like that knew, I'm not saying like Molly's not educated, she obviously is, but
Yeah.
the normal witch or wizard will probably just lean into those stereotypes and stigmas
for sure.
and not realize that people like Remus exist that can produce productive lives in the wizarding world outside of a couple of days of a month.
Right.
And like there were things supposedly put in play. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a whole tangent.
No, I appreciate it because it's enlightening me.
There was supposedly the Ministry of Magic tried to put things in place to help werewolves during their transition, and they tried like a couple of different sects of the government to help, including like there's an actual name for it, and I'll get it on the next podcast, I promise. But or the next one, I'll get it on there. But it was like essentially a werewolf hotline.
Oh.
Like you can call and be like and help the transition process and like call and get help through it, almost like a therapy.
Right.
Here's the one drawback. Most people had stereotypes and stigmas of this. Wouldn't hire you, wouldn't talk to you, you'd be a outcast of society. So who signed up for these things? No one.
Right.
No one would admit to being a werewolf because they'd be stigmatized.
Right.
So no one helped. No one signed up for the help.
Yeah.
And I think one of the programs completely fell through. And then one of the programs is, I think, still technically part of the Department for Regulation of things. So.
Right.
And then they had an issue, apparently, at one point. Do we classify werewolves as beasts or beings? Which I think is the same thing as, like, centaurs go through. Are you a beast or are you a being?
Yeah. Right.
So.
Right.
And they couldn't, I don't think, as far as I know, the ministry would have come up with an answer to that question as of this book.
Right. Yeah, it's a complicated topic for sure.
That's a long rant on werewolves.
No, it's the more you know.
The more you know.
You can understand.
You understand where the stigma is coming from.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, yeah, that's totally fair, and I get Anna's point on Molly does lean into the tabloid side of things. Like, she does buy into, like, Lockhart.
Oh, yeah.
Completely.
Right.
And a couple other things like that.
Right.
I could
She's
see her
human.
buying into that, yeah.
Wizard.
But she's far from the only one.
Right.
And werewolves are scary.
Yeah.
And I think, Anna and I talked about, she does go through a development process. We don't really ever know if she's still cautious around Remus, I guess. I don't know how cautious she ever is around Remus.
I don't...
But she obviously spends a lot of time around him.
Yeah. I think, too, it's just, like, it's never for sure mentioned that Molly Weasley has these stigmas about werewolves. I think, too, that was the other issue. Like, I don't ever remember a time where Molly has been like, hey, werewolves. I mean, obviously, yes, Ron is, probably coming up with these opinions and these ideas from his parents, You
got to get them from somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And growing up in a wizarding family, they're probably... And who knows? I mean, wizarding media, like shows and stuff, probably don't do any better job of depicting werewolves in a great, in a great light. So,
but from I'm not a mother, but like from a mother's perspective, I could, understand being like, yeah, no, stay away from that. Like, that's scary.
Well, sure. I mean, especially when you know that they target wizard children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Again, not saying that all werewolves are bad.
Oh yeah, and it's like, I guess it's like I said, like a form of breeding in a way where they do that out of instinct to create more of them.
Right.
So, Greyback is a special case where he is specifically doing it maliciously, and it's talked about like he puts himself in specific situations.
Right.
He I'm going to turn this day, let me go to a zoo or something like that where I have the most potential to do the most damage.
Right. And, I mean, if you think about it that way, it's like that, okay, if you put it into like a media, news, real world type of scenario, this is not the norm, right? This being advertised that, like, hey, all werewolves are like grayback.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yep.
So there's that aspect of it too.
There's a lot. We just talked a lot about werewolves.
We did.
Do you have anything else on werewolves?
No.
Okay.
I feel like I shared way more opinions than I really thought I had too. So.
Yeah, everybody else does deep dives on this podcast, and I figured I'd try to do one on werewolves and Remus.
I thought that was excellent. I really enjoyed that. It was fun hearing a deep dive from you.
I know, right? Hey, yeah. I'm capable of doing a deep dive. The other thing I wanted to get to from this chapter, especially, and this is a spoiler of spoilers, Snape.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start this off because I know people are going to get all riled up and it's, oh, Dan is saying stuff again on the podcast. I know. So I'm going to preface this by saying Snape is obviously under a certain type of mindset in this chapter. He's a little deranged. Mm-hmm. He's a little over the top. He's a little dramatic. All of the above. He is not his calm, cool, collected self that he normally is, as vindictive as he is. Yeah. He's usually still calm, reserved, and calculating. Mm-hmm. He's not any of those in this chapter.
Yeah.
That all being said, we know where this character goes, and we know what his motivations are, which are revealed in the last book, to the dismay of many. Many disagree, agree, whatever. But it always comes down to the always part of it.
Yeah.
My point being, just to get straight to the point, I think Snape, yes, he has, believe me, he has selfish motivations here.
Yeah.
He has vindictive, selfish motivations, yes.
Yes.
That being said, in his mind, from all the facts that he knows, which are not completely out of question, he's walking into a shrieking shack with a werewolf on the night he's supposed to transform, because Snape notes that he hadn't taken his potion that night. Mm-hmm. So he's walking into the shrieking shack knowing that a werewolf might change at any point that night. Number one. Number two, he believes Sirius Black killed not only Peter, but killed many muggles when he blew up the street and is a follower of Voldemort. So he, I think, truly believes he's the hero in this situation. He's going to come in and save the three children, no matter how much he actually dislikes Ron, Harry, and Hermione.
Right.
I truly think he believes he thinks he's the hero here.
Oh, yeah.
Like, 100%. He's sweeping in, and as far as the facts that he knows,
yeah,
I think he believes that he's saving these children.
Right.
Which would then fulfill his protecting Harry promise to Dumbledore.
Right.
So, in a weird roundabout way, despite the selfish motivations that he has, secondary, it's like he literally comes in, and I think that's why he's so triumphant when he takes off the cloak and is like, yeah. It's because it's a win for him here. Like, saves the day, saves these children, gets to get one over on Lupin and Sirius, puts a murderer back in jail, and possibly opens up the Defense Against the Dark Arts job for, like, he is winning across the board here.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he must be so overjoyed. And all of his thoughts and reasonings aren't too far off of the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, the end result is off, obviously.
Yeah.
But his connections are not terribly wrong.
No.
Like, everything he knows lines up to have his result.
Yeah.
Snape's a fun character in this chapter. Kind of, to just kind of pick apart.
Right.
And the idea that, oh, well, again, this is spoilers, so Snape being a Death Eater and being, like, a very close connection with Voldy himself, wouldn't he know that Sirius is the spy, or who is the spy? Or Peter was the spy, for that matter.
Right.
As close to the chest as Dumbledore is, Voldy plays a lot of things close to the chest himself. And I don't know that he'd divulge all of his plans to all of his Death Eaters, even the ones that are in his inner circle, like the the Bellatrixes and the Dolohofs and the, whatever. Anna will like that I got Dollhoff into a podcast. But, so no, he wouldn't necessarily know who that spy was.
Yeah.
Or to what endgame that spy was being played.
Right.
All he knows is that, as far as that whole thing goes, he was the one that informed Voldemort of the prophecy itself.
Yeah.
That's all he really knows about it, right? As far as I'm aware.
I think so.
So, so he obviously has his own part to play, hence wanting to come through for Lily, hence the promise to Dumbledore to protect Harry, hence him coming into the Shrieking Shack, and it all...
Wands a-blazing.
Sparks coming out of the wand a little bit. I'm just saying, like, Snape's got a lot going on in his head, and I truly believe he 100% thinks he's the hero here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But, I don't know. It's just interesting. A lot of people will come at me and probably be like, protecting Harry thing. There's no way he was, coming in there with the thought of protecting Harry. And I'm not saying that was his first thought.
Right.
I'm just saying it was a thought.
Right. Well, I think it's a bundle of mixed emotions. I mean, running into two people that basically tormented you throughout your adolescent years, on top of all of the history of Lily and
for sure,
protecting Harry, but at the same time Harry being, seeing James and Harry. It's a very heated situation. I
think you can almost take a little bit of the protecting Harry thing from some of his quotes. Like, he can come at Harry a lot harder than he does.
Right.
And it's because he's yelling at him and, calling him a fool and all these things. Or you were played like a fool. And Snape's just like, just get out.
Yeah.
Just get out of here.
Right.
Like, let me deal with these. You go.
Right.
And Harry takes it as like a dismissive, I'm a student thing. And,
right.
And obviously he has no idea at this time that Snape's... You can't tell me that there's 0% of Snape that's like, I got to protect this kid from a werewolf and a murder.
Yeah.
Like, I get he has a lot of personal stuff that he's got to take care of right now.
Right.
But you can't tell me that 0% of Snape is like, I got to protect this kid from these dangerous individuals.
Right. Right.
So, but yeah, I don't know. I just found it super fascinating.
Yeah, he's a great character.
We are going to stop it here, and hopefully you enjoyed the conversation. We talked a whole lot about a lot of different things and a lot about werewolves and Snape and all kinds of different things. So we hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next week for Chapter 20. Molly's going to be back with us.
I am.
It's another short chapter. It's like a really condensed short chapter. So
yeah, it did give me some feels, though.
All right. Well, I'm excited for Chapter 20, and we'll be right back. So for Molly, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hogwarts a Pod.